everybody, Garry Adelman, American Battlefield Trust, and here we are in yet another place I've been wanting to come for a long time, and I think you have too, Kris.
Yeah, this is the National Infantry Museum here at Fort Moore in Columbus, Georgia, and this is a state-of-the-art facility created in 2009. And we want to thank the staff and the curators for having us here to show us around a little bit and to allow us to show you through their galleries, their artifacts. You have more than 35,000 artifacts here. You're not going to see them all today. And I want to mention on this video that we're going to see the war through the eyes of the common infantryman, and we're going to go through the America's wars, from basically the start of the revolution through the current war on terror. And it's going to be a very quick video for us. I know it's quick is relative because it's going to take us about 30 to 40 minutes to go through this museum, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. So we encourage you to come here, check out their website, and really this is a second to none facility.
And there's a lot to see outdoors, including what's behind us, but we'll talk about that at the end of the video. So here we are entering what I can only call very attractive vignettes.
Yeah, we're inside the Infantry Museum, and as we walk up here, we're actually walking through a timeline of American combat. And this starts at redoubts numbers 9 and 10 down at Yorktown. This would be the Siege of Yorktown that took place in October 1781. And this is what really is going to break the camel's back down there at the victories at redoubts 9 and 10 on the Yorktown battlefield, and eventually lead to the surrender of Cornwallis's army.
Of course, that's where Alexander Hamilton got his glory as well, and boom, here we are onto the Civil War, and we're about to walk across Burnside Bridge. Here, presumably, is where the 51st New York and the 51st Pennsylvania are coming across Burnside Bridge here, and you can see what they've done here. They put a Confederate soldier, presumably of Toombs's brigade, the Georgians who were from around these parts, actually on the other side shooting down upon the bridge.
And then we make a big jump here to the Battle of Soissons, which is during World War I, July 1918, around the Second Marne offensive. You can see here what a burned out and bombed out village near Soissons would look like in France. American doughboys advancing forward. This is one of our first major actions that will take place and eventually lead into the Meuse-Argonne offensive. And then we jump to the very famous, it says landing at Omaha Beach, but what you're seeing is actually the break point between Utah and Omaha, and that is La Pointe du Hoc, and that's James Rutter's Rangers going up Pointe du Hoc on the morning of June 6, 1944. You can see a guy here with a BAR, Browning automatic rifle, and you can see the ladders going up there.
And note, if you go even a little higher up here, we're standing underneath a glider. Which Kris might know something about, but
yeah,
look, it's easy to miss things here.
So this glider, one of the Waco gliders, this is one of 13 still remaining. This glider was produced all around the United States, including my hometown in Pittsburgh, but these were made out of plywood, and this is where you would get glider infantry. You would also have the U.S. Rangers here, which were also first trained as infantry, then become specialized troops, and then of course you will have the parachute infantry made famous in Band of Brothers. This is Corregidor. This is over in the Philippines. This is cracking the rock at Corregidor, and if you look up into the canopy of this parachute, or this paratrooper coming down, you can actually see a video playing up in that area. This is Millet's bayonet attack. It took place in February of 1951, and it is during the Korean War, and this is the last organized bayonet charge led in the U.S. Army, and you can see them charging into this communist-held bunker, machine gun nest. And then, of course, Fort Moore, I should say, is named after Hal Moore and his wife. And this is his action that took place in the Lidrang Valley, made famous in his book, We Were Once Young and Soldiers, and of course made famous by the movie We Were Soldiers with Sam Elliott and Mel Gibson. You can see the Huey dropping them off in 1965 in the Lidrang Valley. The centerpiece of the museum, the literal centerpiece of the museum, was built around this Bradley fighting vehicle. This takes us up to 2003, up into our more modern war on terror. And you can see infantry coming out of this vehicle out of the back. The commander sending the men forward. You can see the Bushman 242 minigun on the front of it. This is just a really amazing piece that they have here. That is the centerpiece of this museum. They, again, literally built the museum around this Bradley fighting vehicle. And then, of course, up here, more modern drones that we hear a lot about on our modern battlefields. But this is just the introduction to this museum. This is how you walk into it, and there's a lot more to see. And we're going to work our way through the next gallery. Be a little bit quiet because it's pretty loud in here, but this talks about Fort Moore and the home of the U.S. Infantry.
I am a drill sergeant.
I will assist each individual in your efforts.
Over here we have the Ranger wall. Garry said in our walkthrough that he climbs this every morning.
But I do it with one arm. As it gets a little quieter here, we can come and again, they're really trying to focus in many cases upon the local experience here. Of course, I was immediately drawn to this. Of course, Fort Benning, which was the previous name to Fort Moore, is actually named after Henry Louis Rock Benning. Think of him, his soldiers above Burnside Bridge. Think of them attacking Devil's Den. Think of them in the Overland Campaign and so many other places where they fought. Think of them at Chickamauga, and that's Henry L. Benning's trunk and his trunk cover. And you're seeing some other early things from there. Let's maybe look out the window, Kris, and give them a little tease. What are we seeing in the distance there?
In the distance out here, as we come right up against the window, you're seeing the old Company Street, a recreated Company Street here from whenever this was the World War II training era, the Chattahoochee Choo-Choos out there, and that small building in the near distance, that was George Patton's barracks while he was out here. And you're also looking out onto Daniel Inouye Field. Inouye was from Hawaii. He was a member of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and earned his Medal of Honor in the Second World War.
So I really like the approach here. That way to get you right into the museum through those vignettes was very effective. And then they're going to go into much more detail about all those actions.
Yeah, and we're just cruising our way through here. There's a lot to see. We encourage you to come out here to the museum. Check everything out while you're here in the museum. We're down in Columbus, Georgia. They have more than 35,000 artifacts in their collection. We're only seeing a very small portion of it. And as we're walking through here, we're encouraging you to come here, but we'll point out a few things that we've noticed and the curators have pointed out to us as we made our walkthrough.
Yeah, we're just trying to give you a little teaser in hopes that you'll come to Columbus, Georgia and check out this impressive facility. And you can see they have some room to grow and some room for some special events, both indoor and out. I want to stress that there's a lot to see outdoors here. There's armor, there are memorials. As Kris showed you, there's the World War II street. They're constructing a new Korean War memorial as well. They have a replica of the Vietnam Wall, 3/4 size. So very cool. Now, what are we doing here, Kris?
So we're entering into the era of 1775 to 1898, and this is basically the beginning of the United States. Here we are before we are the United States as we know. This is showing the Massachusetts Bay Colony. This is while we were colonies. Give you an idea of what the early arms would look like. I'm going to zoom out here to give you a little bit of better view, and then we'll move our way into the Revolutionary War era. This is what a typical Continental Infantry soldier, enlisted man would look like during the war. His tricorn hat, three-corner hat, probably his French musket, because we would have the Charleville muskets coming in from France, and yes, that is one, a reproduction of it. You can see the USA buttons on there, his bayonet, his socket bayonet, and of course, his backpack. They have a lot of mannequins throughout this facility, and they do a great job of representing what the soldier looked like through the years.
I'd like to compliment them on that approach here, and of course, this is the approach on the actual infantrymen, so well done.
Then to walk us through the major battles of the Revolution. Of course, this is the Infantry Museum, so they're going to tell us about the insignia as we go along the way. You'll learn about ranks, divisional patches, and other items that will be on the uniform of the soldiers, identifying them throughout history. But one of their prized possessions, and this is a digital reproduction. They have this in their collection, and this is a commission signed for an officer by John Hancock, the president of the Continental Congress. And you can see, and I'm going to zoom in here, you can see his distinctive John Hancock, as we like to say,
on
this document, just like you would see on our Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, I'm seeing powder horn, I'm seeing late 18th century grape shot, I'm seeing edged weapons, I'm seeing firearms, and so much more. And again, we just have to keep moving because we want you to come here, because this would be a 6-hour video if we started talking about all that stuff.
And we move into a very strange era for the United States military, the Army and the Navy, and this is the Legion of the United States. And this is when we're arguing within the political side of the sphere of, should we have a large army, should we have a small army, large navy, small navy? And this comes out on the heels of the War of Independence. And remember, one of the reasons that we went to war is because of quartering of soldiers and having soldiers come into our homes. So do we want to have a big army or not? And that's a big fight that we have throughout much of the life of the early U.S. Army. Of course, we move into the War of 1812. This is what a typical War of 1812 soldier would look like, again with his flintlock musket, his Shako style hat, which was known as a brain cooker because it was made out of leather, and in the hot sun it would just absorb the heat, his soft-sided backpack, and wooden canteen. So this is a really great representation of the U.S. soldier, someone who may have fought at Lundy Lane under this guy here, a guy named Winfield Scott,
What
the
a
greatest
great
soldier
painting.
of his age.
Yeah, what a great painting. Check out our New York video where we went to Scott's house. Check out several videos where we've addressed, because he has both 1812 and Mexican War and, of course, Civil War connections.
And there's again the brain cooker, the Shako up there. You can see the white leather, which was hard to keep clean for these soldiers, with their straps for their bayonet as well as their cartridge box. Massive drum. I would hate to have to carry that drum. It's probably about 3.5 foot high at least. But we need to keep moving on, Gary.
Yeah, so now we're going to, looks like, move on in toward the era of Mexico. But man, just check out what a cool rifleman's outfit you see here from the War of 1812. I'm sure that there were hassles about it, you know, not the least of which is maybe the sleeves not going quite far enough. But,
Yeah, it's a big hunting shirt
yeah,
that this gentleman's wearing.
It does beg the question, Chris, have infantrymen over time ever been like really happy with what they were issued? I mean, maybe, you know, it's more comfortable now, but I'm sure that there are, you know, things that they wish were different in every single age about their headgear, their uniform themselves, and of course their weapons.
Yeah, most of the time it's about functionality and how cheaply you can make something en masse. And unfortunately, that is the name of the game. The lowest bidding government contractor usually making certain things, and it wasn't always for the comfort of the soldiers. That we try to look at that more today.
I love that, you know, they're trying to tell a broad story here, so they can only have so many artifacts, but here you have an 1842 model howitzer with battle honors right on it. You might be able to see some of the battles of the Mexican War, Veracruz, or Gordo, Contreras, Churubusco, and everybody's favorite, Chapultepec often, and of course, you know, Mexico City, but you know, they put that on the backdrop of often period drawings. So I just think that they do an excellent job here, quickly moving through complex subjects, but through the sphere of the infantrymen, while still, you know, remembering that they were working in cooperation with the armor, with the cavalry, with the air support later. You know, it's a really interesting approach.
I like the pommel on this saddle. This is an officer's saddle from the Mexican-American War, which took place between 1846 and 1848. And the pommel itself is that brass head
Very
of an
cool.
eagle that also kind of looks a little bit like a turkey, which Ben Franklin always said was a noble bird in the musical 1776. We start to see the percussion-capped musket. That's when you put a percussion cap of fulminated mercury onto the cone of the gun, and that will create the fire that you need that will ignite the gunpowder, which will send the ball down the barrel of this musket. Of course, below it you can see the flintlock musket, where it's more exposed and less reliable whenever firing in adverse weather conditions. So we're starting to see that change that's coming within the Army's equipment. Moving across here, we have some flags that we're getting into. Gary?
Yeah, I was just going to say another room where they're sort of mixing in a little 1812 and Mexican War action, and then as you look up here, you're seeing some, you know, more flags and guidons and whatnot. And as we approach it, these lights will come on. These are for U.S. colored troops. You know, one is the second national flag. That's the 34 star you see here, and they don't want any flash photography. The light only goes on when they come, because these are in in pretty beautiful shape, especially this one on the right for the second U.S. colored troops, or second USCT. Very impressive, and just imagine what this must have meant to them to be able to carry these colors actually in action of the Civil War.
And each one of these are about 6 foot by 6 foot. Over here we have a smaller guidon for the Washington Infantry. They are from actually Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown, and that's known as a guidon that would have been carried on the end of a line or by a small company of 100 or so men. They go off to war with the Union 6th Army Corps. See a lot of action there.
It's real beautiful.
One thing before we walk away from here, I just want to point out that may confuse some folks is this gentleman here standing, the drummer, who is wearing red. During the War of 1812, red was not for always the red coats of the British, but it was also for the red coats of the musicians who would serve in the American Army. So if you check out our Baltimore video, our Baltimore virtual field trip, you can see the musicians of Fort McHenry playing in those uniforms.
And before we get on the people, they should have known better. You don't know who you're going to be fighting next when you're raising an army and coming up with all these regulations. Maybe they thought it perfectly safe to put these guys in red. So where are we now, Kris?
We've entered the Civil War. This is the Civil War era. We're showing 6-pounder cannon over here, rifled 6-pounder cannon, which is on the trunnion says 1861. The trunnion is this little piece of the cannon that sticks out from the main barrel and sits on the carriage, and then you put a trunnion strap over top of that so it doesn't go bouncing off whenever you're pulling it across land.
Good. And let's look over here. So they have some various objects. I mean, I don't know that this is Hardee hat is from the Iron Brigade in the 7th Wisconsin, but you've got the 7 there. How many designated 7s are actually wearing the Hardee? It certainly fits.
Or the 7th U.S. Infantry.
Yeah, exactly. Could be exactly. And, of course, they're resetting up how the armies are organized, a very good way to understand when you're studying a historic conflict. Of course, now we're seeing something many of you are more familiar with, how an infantry soldier actually might look. I'm glad that they put him in a sort of a jaunty pose, as befits the Civil War photographs of the time. And Kris, would you like to say anything about this piece right here? I like that they have a lot of, this is what the soldier would have carried and used, but this piece right here.
Yeah, we have dominoes. We lead over into playing cards with no numbers. You have to know how to count here. But this is a Bible or a prayer book that was carried by a soldier at Fort Wagner from the 54th Massachusetts Infantry. It's actually inside of there, and it was later captured after this man was killed on the battlefield. It was captured by a member of the 28th Georgia Infantry who took that book off of the body of Private William Parker of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, and he would carry it for the rest of the war. After the war, the family of the Georgia private will return it or donate it to the museum. So we actually have that tie here from Fort Wagner in the 54th Massachusetts.
And this is dangerous because we could get stuck in this room all day, but let me just point out one more thing. Of course, sometimes when they work trying to keep, they're in the sun, they're trying to keep things off their necks, you could devise a slide use your handkerchief to protect your neck. And here you have just absolutely this sort of forge cap with the handkerchief behind it, and then a slide that you could use to sort of affix your handkerchief, and it's inscribed for the Battle of Crampton's Gap, where the American Battlefield Trust at South Mountain has been particularly active.
Yeah, that's a McDowell style forge cap sitting on top of what's called a havelock that goes down the back of your neck, and it does a great job of keeping the sun off and the heat into your neck.
I always like seeing these sashes. They're, you can just see how it would have made you stand out, made you more conspicuous in both a good and a dangerous way as well.
Yeah, the sashes will denote if you're an officer. It will also tell you if you're with the infantry or if you're with the medical department or the cavalry. It has a functionality as well to help hold up your sword belt at times if you needed a little bit more girth there. This is Roman Ayers. He's a West Point graduate and allegedly the only man to serve in the Army of the Potomac in every major engagement, according to his biography that Army served in.
You may have seen his field desk over there as well, and if you don't, you'll have to come back. And I always, because they appear in so many photographs here, I love seeing these infantry spades. You can just see the burial details, digging trenches and whatnot. You see these once you start looking, and there's something about seeing the actual version of what you've seen in Civil War photographs or read about in Civil War books.
And there's a display here about Columbus, Georgia, telling you about the industry of the Confederacy. Columbus is the second largest manufacturing center for the Confederacy, so they do a good job of showing you what the Confederate soldier looked like around 1864 in the area, and of course what their creating down here in Columbus.
And let me note, at Antietam, at Gettysburg, during the Overland Campaign at Chickamauga, it's some of these guys recruited around here. Henry Benning, I believe, is buried in Columbus, and he originally formed the Columbus Guards, one of the companies, I believe, of the 2nd Georgia. And it's a really interesting approach to bring it down to local, bring it down to Fort Benning in Columbus, Georgia for this display. I like that they did this.
And we're going to move out of the Civil War here and move our way onto the frontier, because we still have a lot of the U.S. infantry to cover. We're not going to cover everything. Again, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. Please click that like and subscribe button. Check out our videos when we went to West Point. Check out our videos when we've been behind the scenes at Harrisburg and other museums. And of course, we want you to come over and check out the website of our friends here down at the Infantry Museum, so that you can learn more about their collection and come down here and visit. We're in the post-Civil War era. You'll see a lot of discarded Springfield and Enfield rifled muskets, which are converted into what we call trapdoors later, meaning they create them or they transition from a muzzle loader into a breech loading rifle. So you'll see a lot of these once used during the American Civil War as black powder muskets converted into a cartridge using musket that can be loaded from the back. Really a neat display here. Of course, we have Emory Upton, who played an integral role during the American Civil War at places like Spotsylvania Courthouse. But the piece de resistance for most people here, especially in the Civil War era, who love to play the what if everybody had a Gatling gun, and there is your Gatling gun with side boxes and all. So this is a really great piece that they have on display here. You can see the multiple barrels that you crank like a coffee grinder. They would turn, the shells would go down through a long tube into the breech of the gun, be fed into that coffee grinder, and then fire. And there's a small swivel or traverse mechanism that's also built in as you grind your coffee, which are, in this case, bullets.
And as we walk to the next gallery, let me just stress that these saw very limited use in the Civil War. I think there's a dozen of them around Petersburg, a few on naval ships, and I would challenge you to find an area where it was decisive actually in combat at Petersburg or elsewhere. I mean, very limited use, but nonetheless, they still attract our attention to this day. Now, here's where I'm gonna have to start dragging Kris forward again, because we're really entering part of his bag. World War I and World War II. Here's the U.S. on the world stage.
So we're moving into the Spanish-American War, and I think one of the most interesting pieces they have here is what helped to instigate the war between Spain and the United States. And this is a porthole from the USS Maine, which was sank in Havana Harbor at the outset of the war, and really starts the hostilities there. But as we move through the Spanish-American War, we see people like William Wheeler and Fitzhugh Lee and others who come back from the old army and serve, or from the Confederate Army, and are asked to serve in the United States Army. So we'll see them re-enter United States service. President William McKinley, he is the president at the time. He's going to preside over the peace conference. He's a Civil War veteran himself and earned his Medal of Honor for actions at the Battle of Antietam. As we move through, we're moving towards the First World War, and we can see a large number of artifacts brought over, and you can see the war bonds. We can see the helmets that you would wear. There's the old German pickle-style helmet up there on the top. We also have the early version of dog tags right here, and we have a shot-up sign of Verdun in the Meuse area, showing the ferocity of the fighting around Verdun and the Meuse Argonne. And my favorite word on there is Don de Michelin. Michelin tires actually came up with the first tour books for folks, so that you would go back out onto the roads after World War I to not only learn about French history, but to use those tires on the very poor roads, because you're going to need to buy new tires. So they're the early instigators of battlefield tourism. This is what a French soldier would look like, very much looking like it would during the American Civil War, wearing wool and blue going off to war. They look in those black and white photographs like they have different uniforms on. Nope, they're just like our men who go off to the Civil War. Now we're entering into what a trench would look like, a recreation of a trench during the First World War. You can hear the sounds of battle, men ahead of us going over the top. there was a literal line of entrenchments that would go from the Belgian coast near along the English Channel, through Belgium, down through France, Germany, ending down along the Swiss Alps. You can see that they have a shot up sign that says "Do not stand here." Shot up to give you the idea, if you poke your head over the top in a no man's land, that you will most likely lose your life. So this is a really awesome representation of what a World War I trench would look like. And this was the forerunner in the Civil War, would lead to this during the First World War. Coming through this area, we'll see just a handful of really neat artifacts. We have a German machine gun down here. This German machine gun looks a lot like the Browning water-cooled machine gun that the Americans would use. But one thing that most people don't realize is that many of the machine gunners would be issued body armor, that's plate armor here, and the German-style helmets would also have a face shield like in the Knights of Old to go over top of you. So some of these guys are going off to war wearing armor. But we lead from the First World War, which we will see the largest United States Army put together, to go overseas here and start to give you the idea of our modern divisional patches. As we cross here, we're going to go from one World War into the next World War, and that's going to take us into the European theater of operations and, of course, the Pacific theater of operations.
I want to stress that immersive trench experience was very cool. I know they have others here as well, and I really want to encourage you to, when you come, to absorb those. They've done a very nice job with them.
And for those of you who are complaining that I spoke over top of it, we want you to come here and experience it yourself. So here we are seeing the evolution of what was Fort Benning, today known as Fort Moore, and we're seeing the lead up to the World Wars. We can see the rise of fascism around the world, setting the stage of what this would look like. We have a number of artifacts, including an epaulet of Benito Mussolini, El Duce himself, that was donated to the museum. Down in this area, we have a massive copy of what is known as Mein Kampf. There's a lot of glare here, I'm sorry. Mein Kampf is known as Mein Struggle, or My Struggle, and that was written by Adolf Hitler whenever he was, after he was jailed for the beer hall Push in Munich in 1923, or Munich in 1923.
Continuing to walk through, they give a more than ample treatment of World War II here, and all you diorama fans are about to be satisfied, I believe.
Yeah, we have a diorama over here of Kasserine Pass. This is the early days of the fight in Africa, February of 1943. This will be made famous in the movie Patton, if you ever watched Patton. Of course, over here we have the Jeep, the backbone of the U.S. infantry during World War II. And this is what one of the typical Jeeps would look like.
Pinnacle of comfort.
Yeah, pinnacle of comfort. Created by the Bantam Car Company in Butler, Pennsylvania, and then created by Ford and Willys Overland during World War II. Of course, we're also going to see what the Japanese combatants and other combatants who took on the U.S. forces, how they look. We also see the U.S. infantryman over here, his typical with an M1 Garand rifle. You can see with his helmet on, fragmentation grenades, everything, and give you the loadout of a World War II soldier. So really an amazing collection here. As we move forward, they're telling the stories of both the European and the Pacific theaters. We see Aachen here over in Germany. This is one of the first cities to fall on German soil. Whenever Aachen was taken on by the U.S. Army, they expected fierce resistance because this is the first major fight on German soil. Over in this area, we have another diorama showing the island hopping, part of the island hopping campaign, but this will take us to Burma and show you the fighting there with Joe Stilwell's army over in the Burmese jungle. Then we have the Hurricane Forest, the Hell of the Hurricane Forest, another display here. The Hell of the Hurricane If you ever saw the fall of Paris, you'll see the 28th Division marching down the Champs-Élysées, only to go pick up their rifles at the end and march off into this, the meat grinder that was the hell of the Hurricane. We have a piece of a glider, which is really neat. We saw one of those gliders earlier today. As we move through here, we'll start to see what the Arctic and mountain troops would look like. Yes, those are actually ski poles that you're looking at. You'll see a captured German MP-40 machine gun in the background, and this is the 10th Mountain Division showing all of their different uses or equipment.
Of course, they have covering the concentration camps and liberation of that as well in the Holocaust.
So this is, as Garry pointed out, the Holocaust, and this is a large map that's showing you the death camps as well as the concentration camps down here at Dachau, which is the first concentration camp, opened on March 22nd, 1933, and all of the sub-camps. That's what these sub-camps are for Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, and all the other just horrible places of unspeakable terror that were helped liberated by the Americans, French, British, and Russians. And this is one of the uniforms that would have been given to a concentration camp prisoner, and more than 6 million people were murdered by the Germans during the Holocaust. Over here we start to see the Pacific Theater. Moving through the Pacific Theater, we'll see MacArthur coming back into the Philippines. We'll also see a lot of the different equipment that they carried there. Over here is Raymond O'Day's prisoner of war uniform whenever he was captured, I believe at Corregidor. And you can see there's a picture of the colonel there.
Known as Colonel Fix-It.
And they created their own slippers, made their own clothing out of anything that they could, which is pretty amazing. And then of course over here we have the trophies of war. Trophies of war from World War II, a bust of Hitler's head, Hermann Goering's Field Marshal baton, Japanese swords of surrender whenever they surrendered in the Pacific Theater. So this is a really impressive display. And again, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg, and I understand we're moving quickly through here. And we're going to go finish off in one of the other galleries that will take us up into the Cold War as well as into Vietnam, and then hopefully have a moment for the global war on terror.
Now, and not only, by the way, I want to notice that not only are we moving quickly, we're skipping things within those galleries as well. We're skipping whole sections as well, where they're covering POWs, where they're covering women at war, where they're covering all these other actions. We're just going to show you as much as we can in hopes that you'll come.
And I mean, one of my favorite artifacts I totally skipped over is a silk handkerchief that was issued to soldiers during the Normandy liberation that is going to show you a map. So there was a silk scarf with the map of Normandy on it, which is really neat. This is leading us into the Korean conflict, the Korean War. We're seeing a 4.2-inch mortar outpost over here as one of their large displays. You can hear the howling winds of places like the Chosin Reservoir and in the mountainous region of Korea, made famous, probably most famous, by the movie and the television series MASH. But we could see the seesaw war that took place along the 38th parallel there in North and South Korea. A conflict that still has implications, obviously, to us to this day. Moving past Korea, and we're seeing one of the Davy Crockett's as we move into the nuclear war. This is a small nuclear warhead launcher that can be used by frontline troops. We have a French machine gun over here, and we're starting to move into the Indochina theater of war, which turns into what we know as the Vietnam War, which was a long burning fuse that took place well before American involvement. Over here we have what's called the Life in Country, and I'm going to be quiet as we walk through, and this is going to give you an idea of what it was like for an infantryman to move through the jungles of Vietnam.
It was like a surreal existence.
fought for our lives. At a particular point, we all thought we were going to die. We were surrounded, we were outnumbered, and we had to depend on each other. I didn't see anybody else, any of my friends for a while. You think you're the only man alive, so you fight that way. You fight for survival. Well, you don't.
And as you exit from that experience, you see a Huey flying over top of the head. You see the standard issued out U.S. infantry soldier who's going off to Vietnam with his M16, his now famous M16, and gives you the idea of what this man would look like before he's going into jungle warfare in Southeast Asia. Of course, we have other arms and armament of the U.S. Army, M79 grenade launchers, the M21 sniper rifle, great pieces of artifacts here. And then on the other side, we have the communist side, Kalashnikov, as well as RPGs, and what the communist soldiers would be outfitted in during Vietnam. We're going to keep moving here, showing you just the transition of the uniform through the Cold War, which doesn't end just at Vietnam. Obviously, it comes up into the 1980s and really ends with the fall, as we will, of the Berlin Wall. You can hear President Reagan speaking right now.
Open this gate.
Actual pieces of the wall there.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
I'm sure, I hope it's not lost on y'all, but when we first started going into the galleries, how quiet they were, in the Civil War and Revolution and War of 1812 sections. And then, of course, we entered the era where we have film and we have sounds, and this museum makes full use of it. So the actual advancement of technology informs the experience here.
And as we go through here, we're just going to work our way through the modern war on terror, showing the American presence, not from 9/11 forward, but basically from the 1980s forward. Of course, they do include the 9/11, but you can see the evolution. Sorry, folks, there's a lot of glare on some of these cases for you. Give you what the kit looks like for the infantrymen heading off into the war on terror.
As far as I know, this was just opened in 2021, so it's the newest gallery that they have here. They have big plans to continue to expand on the interpretation and memorialization here.
Yeah, and this is moving us into sunny Iraq. This is the 36 engineering group that came out of Fort Benning, Georgia. Showing that, we see the Iraqi weapons that were carried during the first Iraq War. Of course, the ever-fun MREs, the meals ready to eat. We have a paratroopers kit out here. This is for one of the U.S. Army Rangers who went into combat shortly after 9/11.
Here's sort of a typical street scene in Iraq that you're seeing. You can see that we're sort of immersed in it. Not in the same immersive way as some of the other areas. Here we are in a much more familiar setting that we've all watched on TV. And seeing a scene like this, very cool.
Yeah, you see the Humvee over here with the troops, one wearing the airborne insignia, getting ready to move forward. This is what the street scene that you're looking at was based off of a picture right there during Operation Tapeworm. You can see the tow missile launcher attached to it. That's a wired missile launcher, short range. You can see the peacekeeping mission over here. One of the highlights of most American infantry, whenever they go abroad from World War I, World War II, and beyond, is engaging with the local kids. And there are so many stories of kids loving the American candy that was handed to them, and that's something that always stuck out to them. A lot of the modern equipment.
Modern by 1990s and early 2000s. I mean, look at the cell phones, and the manners are so much better than before, and I'm sure they were happy to have the latest technology, but compared to what we have today, things get outdated fast.
During Operation Enduring Freedom, this is what an outpost would look like for a typical soldier. This is, you can see the clock up here. Christmas lights, Pop-Tarts, Rice Krispie treats. You know, when we talk about war coming full circle, we started in the 1600s with these galleries, and now it's carried us all the way up into our modern day.
I like their older computers and their tiny DVD players too.
And of course, we're seeing what it looks like for the mountain soldiers, men of the 10th Mountain Division leading their troops up there. We also see airborne patches, and these are the men trying to move up the hillside in Afghanistan, moving MREs and other supplies up through the mountains of Afghanistan. And then moving over here, you can see the female engagement teams that will be over on the battlefields as well. Because remember, we're transitioning in this museum where we have an all-male army. Now we have a male and female army who are going off to war.
It strikes me how much more stuff they're carrying when you looked at the accoutrement of the Revolutionary War soldier compared to how much the soldiers today are carrying. What a difference.
And we'll finish off by walking out into the center gallery here. We'll show you through their centerpiece here in the large gallery, and that is for the Medal of Honor recipients, starting in the Civil War, running through the modern wars, and then we'll step outside to wrap up.
So the Medal of Honor is established basically at the time of the Civil War. They don't have quite photos or drawings for everybody who received them, but I believe the greatest number were awarded for actions during the Civil War, most often carrying a flag, rescuing comrades, acts of meritorious service or bravery. You can see them again and again, and you might even see, even as we scan through, some familiar names who fought in some of the battles that you have studied. Of course, the Medal of Honor, you know, has changed over the years about whether they're given posthumously, whether they're given only to the living. And here is, of course, William Carney. We talk about him a lot from the Civil War, you know, one of the early USCT or US colored troops, you know, involvement in some of the state units, and then we move on to the other wars thereafter.
Yeah, and if you want to check out our video about William Carney told by another recipient named Melvin Morris, he's a Vietnam era recipient, you can check that out over on our YouTube channel.
Good. Here's another soldier from Newmarket Heights. You can see the dates and see actually where they would have fought. When you look at it, 30th of November 1864, that sounds like the Battle of Franklin.
Then we move past the Civil War and started moving to the Indian Wars, the Spanish-American Wars. We'll see the First World War coming through these areas. We'll also start moving into the Second World War. Lots of some familiar faces and some not so familiar faces as you see the date that they earned their medal on the battlefield. So this will give you a really good understanding of just how many recipients there are. More than 3,000, I believe, recipients of the medal. And again, as Garry pointed out, it is the Civil War that has the most number of recipients. And over time, this medal, which has always been honored by us, has really grown in its stature. And a private soldier who earned this medal and wears it on around his neck will be saluted by every rank above him.
And of all the ones I've met, to the person, they're not wearing it for themselves. They're wearing it for the soldiers that they served with.
Absolutely.
And they're very clear on that.
So we'll step outside for a moment, wrap up, but we encourage you to check out this just magnificent museum here in Columbus, Georgia. Thank you for joining us for this walkthrough of the National Infantry Museum in Columbus, Georgia. We encourage you to come down here and check out this facility yourself, and we want to thank the staff and the curators for having us here today. As we close up out here, I just want to point out a couple of items. Behind the camera here, we have a 3/4 scale Vietnam War Memorial. That is the wall that is in Washington, D.C. It's a replica of that with all the names of the men who fell in Vietnam, more than 58,000 names along that 3/4 scale replica of the Vietnam Wall. Over here behind me, we have the World Trade Centers represented. These two cement pillars represent the North and the South Towers, and in the middle of the two, linking them, is a piece of steel beam that was once part of the World Trade Center, and you can even see represented roughly where those planes hit on September 11th, 2001. Going forward about 5 years from that incident, and standing right in the middle is a specialist, Ross McGinnis, who trained here at Fort Benning when it was known as Fort Benning, today Fort Moore. He earned his Medal of Honor in December of 2006 for jumping on a live grenade that fell inside of his vehicle, saving the lives of his squad. And for his actions, he was a Medal of Honor recipient. His is just one of the many stories represented of the infantryman here at the National Infantry Museum in Columbus, Georgia. We encourage you to head over to their website, check out and learn more about them, and of course, click like on this video, click that subscribe button, and check out battlefields.org for more information about what we do. On behalf of Garry Adelman behind the camera, I'm Kris White. Thank you for supporting this swing through Georgia and for supporting battlefield education and preservation.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. To stay up to date on all the latest and coolest videos, please subscribe to the Trust YouTube channel. Preserve, educate, inspire.